Hey there. So my next guest had a hard labor type of background and decided he didn't want to do that anymore. So he decided he wanted to go into game development, and it has become his life mission. And it's actually incredible. He's been able to build his studio. He's got people working with him, and it's all steam ahead on this. And it's absolutely wonderful. This is a wonderful interview. I know you're all going to love it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today, I have a very special guest with us. I have Armando Perez. Hey there, Armando. How's it going?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. It is a beautiful sunny day in Las Vegas. How about yourself?
It's wet here in Central Florida. We just started getting rain about 20 minutes ago.
Well, that's about every day, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Okay, so Armando, I don't like doing a lot of small talk. I like just getting right into the meat and potatoes of this. So why don't you begin by just telling us a little bit about yourself, please?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida. My mom moved us here to Central Florida, so I did most of my schooling here in Central Florida. I graduated high school, took a little bit of time to myself, started a family, then went to college and graduated from Full Sail with a master's degree in creative writing and a bachelor's degree in game design.
Wonderful. All right. I can't wait to unlock you a little bit more because I know what you're doing is pretty awesome. Before we do that, though, I start every interview with a single question. So I'm going to ask you just like I ask everybody else, Armando. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you?
Personally, I'm a 1, but my family considers me a 10 because we grew up with hip hop and R&B, and I listen to rock and roll and heavy metal.
So. Oh, I understand. I'm the outcast in my family. My entire family, it's classic rock and nothing but. And I listen to that R&B and hip hop every now and then. And oh man, he's the black sheep.
Yeah, the old school R&B and hip hop I'm down for. That's kind of my niche. But it's like I said, rock and roll all day.
I love it. Okay. Now this is the Gamerpreneur podcast, so I do need your gaming cred. When did you first start playing video games?
The original NES system, and probably my favorite game was the Kung Fu game for that time back, like when it came out. I played that. I played Legend of Zelda, and the other one was Outrun. That was my favorite racing game back then.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Kung Fu. I have a poster of it right in front of me. It actually used to be behind me when I was in season 1 of the show, and it was probably one of my all-time favorite NES games because it was just so simple. You punch, you kick, you jump, and it was still super hard.
Yeah, it was. It was such a classic side scroller too.
That's right. Okay. And what do you play today, if anything?
Today, I play a lot of PUBG with my buddies and Smite, because that's what one of my buddies got me into is Smite. And then like on a personal offline level, it's usually Hollow Knight, the Ori and the Blind Forest, both versions, Will of the Wisps, and the original. So that's kind of where I stick to.
Okay, so shooters in public, but the Metrovania is in the background. I get it.
Yeah.
All right. And so sounds like you've played pretty much every game I've had, or at least had access to every game I've had. If you had to pick one as your all-time favorite, which one would it be?
I'd have to go with Hollow Knight from Team Cherry. Like, that is what really pushed me into making the game that I'm making today. Like that was the defining moment of like, that's exactly what I want to make.
Beautiful. Okay, I want to talk about that just a second, though. Before we do that, let's get over to the preneur part. Why don't you give us a little bit about your professional background? How did you end up where you are today exactly?
That's a tricky one because for me, I started out with a lot of hands-on work, construction, and retail. Like I did a lot of hands-on stuff, and just physically, I got tired of being able to do it. I couldn't do it anymore. So I started looking for something that I could get into, and I loved games. So I'm like, you know what? I love games. I love writing. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to tell my story through video games. Okay. So that's how I ended up here.
Okay. And so you just started your own company? Did you work for somebody else first? How'd that work?
I've interviewed with a few people, but because of the lack of experience per se, I just went ahead and started my own indie company this year. I've been working on it for like the past 2 or 3 years, but we officially got an official start date this year.
Okay. What's its name?
Soaringpanther Studios.
Beautiful. Okay. And what does Soaringpanther Studios do or focus on?
Right now, we're focusing on the side-scrolling Metroidvania-like games. That's what we're going for. It's just 2D games, and like my purposes is to give people experience that they couldn't get in the industry, and help them to get their foot in the door.
Okay. Now I'm going to pull a Zoolander. Why video games? Like you said, creative writing was your thing. Yes, obviously you're a gamer, but why did you decide to mix these two?
For me, it was just a love of both. Like I love storytelling and I love video games, so I wanted to combine these two things and make it one thing. I mean, I have the skills to do TV writing and movie writing, but video games are just always a passion.
Okay, wonderful. Now your business, you started by yourself?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
I started this by myself.
And was this your first business?
This would actually be my second.
Okay, what was your first?
I was it was a father son grandfather like asphalt construction company down in Miami.
Okay. And did you start that business or I'm trying to get to, is it been a new experience for you starting this game studio or is this kind of old hat? I know how to do business already.
Now this is a whole new ballpark for me personally, because we're talking about technology, and back in construction and asphalt, that was more of a face-to-face, hands-on, like people, and that's how you got your work.
Okay. And how's the game different? Game design studio different?
For me, I'm in charge 100% here, where for the construction, I had my grandfather and my father to fall back on. So this is just me like learning the complete ins and outs, and every mistake that I make, the marketing and all that, I have to learn it all. So it's a completely different ballpark for me.
Okay. And are you by yourself or do you have a team?
I do have a small team with me. I have a programmer, two artists, and an audio engineer.
Okay. And so I try to get my guests to give advice on this show. So it's not just, you telling me about yourself and everybody going, ooh, ah. Like I'm really hoping that maybe you can like unlock somebody's head, show them the way to be able to follow in your footsteps. How did you find these people? Like, everybody says you need to have a team, right? Like having a team is like one of the most important things in any business. But how do you actually go out and do that?
Well, for me, I kind of lucked out a little bit, because one thing that Full Sail taught us was networking. Networking is the most important thing that you can do, especially when you have to put a team together to start building a product. So that's what I did. Is we have a Discord dedicated server full of Full Sailors, and that's what we do is we network and we reach out to each other. By the way, I'm working on this project and I could use this, and this, and people reach out to you. I do the same thing on Facebook, LinkedIn. I just reach out.
Okay. Now, tell us a little bit more about the game, please.
Okay, so
if you're able to.
Oh yeah, most definitely. The game is a Metroidvania-like game, so it's not a traditional Metroidvania. We're going to change it up a little bit, and I want to stick to the 2D game, that 2D world aspect of things. And my story that I'm building is about two brothers trying to rebalance the world, because they were tricked into creating an unbalanced world. So they have to go back and fix it.
Okay.
So that's where the players take place, and they do their job in trying to fix things.
Okay. And what is it like going through and figuring out all the different parts of the game? Obviously, you went to Full Sail. I'm sure they showed you a little bit, but going to school and the real world, totally separate things, right? Have you had speed bumps you weren't expecting, or things that were a little different?
Biggest speed bump for me is because I have back injuries from all of the construction, playing football and all that stuff. That slows me down a lot personally. So I have to delegate some responsibilities to my other members and say, hey, I need you to work on this and you work on that, and that slows me down on a personal level.
Okay. And, so you're at the top and you've said you wear many different hats. You're constantly learning these different hats. What are you like specifically good at though? Like if you had one role you could sit in yourself into, what would that one role be?
For me, that's UI scripting and level design. Those are the two areas that I specialize in, and those are the two areas that I love the most out of the entire area of game design. Like I love building the UI, the HUD. That's my favorite part of game design.
Okay. Now, on the advice side, like if someone wanted to focus on those as well, what would they do?
I tell them the same thing I should have told myself when we were working on our project at the end of my semester is if that's something that you want to specialize in, you got to tell your team, hey, by the way, I need to focus in on this, because that is an important element to a game that if it's not right, it subtracts from the game. It makes that game feel less alive. So honestly, focus on what you specialize in and make that your priority.
Okay, fantastic. And you said you're constantly learning, constantly having to expand yourself in order to be able to do this position. That's your business here. What resources are you turning to in order to learn more? I mean, once school stops, I mean, yeah, you can go back to the library, right? But you're not taking classes necessarily. How are you continuing your education?
For me, I use LinkedIn a lot. And honestly, there's a YouTuber named Thomas Brush who's been a massive help because he is an indie gamer who did 2 of his own games almost on his own. And watching his videos just kind of help push you into that, like, hey, by the way, you can do this. So that's been a big help for me.
Okay, wonderful. Now, what pitfalls have you had to overcome that somebody new, if maybe they're just thinking, oh, I should start up my own studio, and you've kind of been through the ringer for at least a couple of years here. What do they have to watch out for?
The biggest thing that I would worry about when it comes to a pitfall is making sure that you're communicating with your team, especially if you're on a team, because that lack of communication creates so many problems when you're trying to build your studio up.
Okay. How about personal challenges? What has how have you had to grow in ways you weren't expecting?
Growing in ways that I wasn't expecting. Well, the challenge for me is balance. Like balancing work and personal life, like that's something I still struggle with all the time because I have 3 kids that I take care of and do homeschooling with them as well, on top of doing the studio stuff. So like trying to make sure that I get sleep somewhere in that is like the hard part. But like it's a challenge, but that's what we strive for, is for a challenge.
Okay. Now, Armando, I want you to hop in a time machine with me. Okay. We're going to go back in time to we'll say when you're like 18, just pick a random date back then. Okay. And you're going to get to go up to little Armando back then. And you're going to be able to tell him all of his future, everything that's going to happen to him, all the good, all the bad, all the ups, all the downs. You're going to be able to impart all of the wisdom and knowledge and experience and everything that's ever happened to you to him so that he can do it bigger, better, faster, more successful, however you define that term. But if there was only one thing he absolutely had to know, what would you make sure you tell yourself?
I would tell myself something that somebody told me a couple of years ago. Don't regret anything in life because it puts you in the position that you're in now. So for me, I'd just say live your life the way that you're supposed to. And everything from there is a complete learning experience. You'll learn your goods, your bads, and how to make yourself better.
Beautiful. I like that. Okay. Now, to be a little more personal, Armando. See, I actually believe that we learn the most in our life from our failures, not necessarily our successes. Because if you succeed the first time you try something, it may have been luck, who knows, right? But if you fail, you got to take a look at it. You got to figure out what went wrong. Why didn't it go right? And then you got to iterate until you get to the point that you do succeed in the future. So I like to ask, what do you consider your biggest failure in life? And what did you learn from it?
Biggest failure in life. For me, I'd probably, I gotta think about that one. I'd say probably not speaking up enough, especially when it came to team projects. Like some things I just kind of went with the flow with, and like, you know what? Okay, if that's what you guys want to do, that's fine. Let's do that. Instead of speaking up enough and saying, hey, this doesn't look right. We need to change it so that it fixes this problem, because otherwise we will have a problem in the future. So that I feel like that would have been my issue.
Okay. And how have you grown from that lesson?
I try to. It's difficult because there's that personality in me that just wants to keep quiet sometimes, especially with my team. but I'm pushing myself more every day to say, you know what, we need to fix this. I don't like that style. We got to change this up a little bit. Or I didn't like the way that I designed this level. So even telling myself that, like, hey, you got to speak up to yourself as well. So every day I push myself a little bit to speak up a little more.
Fantastic. Okay. Now, other than figuring out how to speak up more, how are you working to improve yourself every day?
Getting sleep. That's like the most important thing. Because right now I usually sleep about 2 to maybe 5 hours a day. That's about usually the amount of sleep I get. So sleep is the most important thing, especially with 3 kids.
Here I am, like my wife wants another one. I'm like, one's probably enough. You're like, less sleep. I can't, I don't know if I can do that one. Okay, Armando, this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much. How do people find you? How do they find your studio? Where are you all at on social media, contact information, all that, please?
Okay, the studio has a website. It's called Soaringpantherstudios.com. We also have a Twitter handle, which is called Soaring Panther. My personal handle is Armando W. Perez on Twitter. So by means, and for the rest of my team, all on the website on the About Us page.
Wonderful. Okay, now, as we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? Or anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
I think we're good. The only thing that I would give is a word of advice for people who are still looking at this. If this is something that you truly want to do, then don't give up and keep pushing yourself to achieve it.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful. Okay, Armando, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to come on with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.